Okay, so ever stop to think about this? The 10 countries in ASEAN together, they're home to like 650 million people.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a market, bigger than the entire European Union.
That's quite a statistic.
It really is. So, okay, let's maybe try and unpack what happens when you bring that many people, that many economies closer together. Because this deep dive, it's really zeroing in on this game-changing regional effort, the ASEAN Economic Community, or AEC for short.
And yeah, there wasn't some overnight thing. ASEAN itself kicked off way back in 1967, just 5 nations, then Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines.
Right.
And interestingly, their main focus wasn't really economics at first. It was more about political cooperation, having a unified voice, keeping things stable in what was, let's face it, a pretty complex region.
Exactly. Trade was definitely there, but maybe not the main driver initially. Then you see, over the years, Brunei joins, then Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia.
They gradually expanded.
Right, reaching the 10 we know today. And then fast forward to 2007, and that's when they really hammer out this AEC blueprint. Big ambition. Create essentially a single market and production base. Deadline, 2015.
And interestingly, that 2008 global financial crisis, it actually kind of accelerated things, didn't it?
It really did. It sort of highlighted just how important closer economic ties could be for resilience.
Yeah, it makes sense. So the core idea of the AEC, it's about breaking down those economic barriers within ASEAN, aiming for this single economic zone.
Yeah, where goods, services, investment, capital, they can all move much more freely. And even freer movement of skilled labor, too. That's the big picture goal.
A huge undertaking, potentially really transformative.
Absolutely. Now, to make this kind of interconnectedness work, you obviously need tools. And a vital one is language, which brings us nicely to the source we're digging into today. 46 English for political scientists in Thailand, preparing for the AEC. Now, this isn't just like a dry academic paper. It gives this really fascinating window into how one specific country, Thailand, is grappling with the language aspect of this huge economic integration, especially for folks in political science.
Yeah, and what's really striking is just how dominant English has become globally, right? In politics, diplomacy, policy.
Totally.
The source actually mentions how even countries with really strong linguistic traditions, like, say, China or Japan, are increasingly using English for official communications, documents, that kind of thing.
It's almost become the default, hasn't it? The lingua franca of the international stage.
Pretty much. And it's not just one type of English either, is it? The source touches on a few different varieties.
Right, yeah, like ENL, English as a native language, ESL, second language.
Yeah.
But maybe the most relevant here is ELF, English as a lingua franca.
Exactly. ELS is crucial in a place like ASEAN, which is so linguistically diverse. It's basically English used as a common bridge between people who don't share a native language.
So not necessarily aiming for perfect native speaker English, but effective communication.
Precisely. It's about getting the message across. You also have, as you mentioned, ENL and ESL, and then EIL, English as an international language, which just recognizes how widely it's used globally. But for ASEAN's internal workings, ELF is probably key.
Okay, so that connects directly to the core of this paper then. How Thai political scientists are actually understanding and using all this specific political terminology in English.
The researchers actually went out and surveyed graduate students, academics in Thailand, even some Thai scholars studying in the U.S., trying to gauge their understanding of these key terms.
Which raises a really important question. If there's a mismatch in understanding or problems translating these terms accurately between English and Thai, what are the risks?
Well, the source suggests it could lead to, misunderstandings, misinterpretations, even potentially misquoting sources in academic work, which obviously isn't ideal for clear scholarly discussion, either within Thailand or internationally.
Yeah, that could definitely muddy the waters. They even mention transliteration. Writing English words using the Thai script as one way non-English speakers might try to grasp these concepts.
Right, but the paper also notes that it's kind of an open question whether these transliterated terms are really used consistently or understood widely enough within the academic community there.
Okay.
And what's significant is the sheer breadth of political vocabulary they looked at. It wasn't just a few terms. The lessons mentioned cover, well, everything from the political history of Thailand and ASEAN to different government systems, how legislatures work, political activities like campaigns and protests, analyzing party speeches, leader profiles, news summaries, even core political theories and ideologies.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive. It's like a whole toolkit for political analysis in English.
Exactly. It highlights how much ground needs to be covered.
And it's not just about knowing the words, is it? The paper really hammers home the need for strong communication skills overall.
Absolutely. Being able to articulate these complex political and economic ideas clearly, that's presented as crucial for Thailand to really participate effectively, competitively within the AEC framework.
Makes sense. You need to be able to make your case, contribute to the discussion.
Precisely. The source emphasizes those 4 basic language skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing, both in local Southeast Asian languages, naturally, but also critically in English. For Thai individuals to really grab the opportunities the AEC offers, these skills are, well, essential.
And specifically for political scientists, that ability to write well-structured research papers in English, that seems key.
Oh, definitely. It's how you share findings, how you engage with the global academic conversation in political science. The paper even lays out the standard structure, intro, methods, results, discussion, conclusion. It's about joining that worldwide scholarly community.
Which, of course, leads straight into the importance of research methodologies themselves.
Right. The source flags this as a core part of postgraduate training. Understanding different approaches, qualitative, quantitative.
And hybrids, too, right? It mentions that it's not always strictly one or the other.
Exactly. Researchers often mix methods to get a richer picture. The paper also touches on specific techniques for gathering data, things like interviews, focus groups, surveys, questionnaires, standard tools in the political science research kit.
Okay, so we've got the language, the research skills, but then there's the whole cultural dimension, isn't there, as the AEC brings these very diverse countries closer?
Hugely important. The source really stresses that language isn't just a neutral tool for swapping facts. It's deeply, deeply intertwined with culture.
Yeah.
And sometimes those cultural differences, reflected in language and communication styles, can actually be barriers to genuine social integration. It paints a picture of needing more than just economic alignment.
So the implication is that speaking English needs to go beyond just grammar and vocabulary.
Yes, absolutely. It needs to include a real focus on cultural awareness, understanding the nuances.
Yeah.
The paper even points out, somewhat starkly, that Thailand's English proficiency has sometimes lagged behind some neighbors, which makes this culturally sensitive approach to language education seem even more urgent for them.
And are there ways suggested to kind of get a handle on these cultural differences?
Yeah, the source mentions some common frameworks political scientists and others use. Things like looking at individualism versus collectivism in societies, how different cultures view power distances, how they cope with uncertainty, or the balance between so-called masculine and feminine societal values, assertiveness versus nurturing, basically.
Right, those Hofstede dimensions and similar models.
Exactly. Tools like that can offer insights, ways to understand why people from different ASEAN backgrounds might approach teamwork or communication differently.
So building those cross-cultural relationships, that's framed as pretty vital for Thailand within the AEC.
Absolutely essential for development, the paper argues. It notes how geography and cultural norms shape communication, so awareness is key for collaboration.
And specifically for political scientists.
Networking is crucial. Collaboration across ASEAN borders for joint research, maybe developing shared university courses, tackling those big regional challenges linked to the AEC together, building that community of scholars.
Okay, so looking ahead then, what does the source see on the horizon for ASEAN politics?
Well, it anticipates a potential shift towards a more people-centered regionalism, maybe a more proactive ASEAN role in regional governance.
More bottom-up focus, maybe.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
but it also acknowledges the big challenges that remain, like tackling those significant socioeconomic inequalities between the member states. That's a tough one.
Yeah, huge disparities there. What else?
There's also the ongoing debate about strengthening human rights mechanisms within ASEAN. How far that goes could really affect the organization's legitimacy, its image on the global stage.
A sensitive area.
Definitely. And then there are the more practical ongoing challenges, really removing those barriers to the free flow of goods, services, investments, skilled labor, and again, ensuring the effective use of English as the working language.
Which brings us back to the role of political scientists, especially the younger generation.
Yes, the source really emphasizes their importance. They need to be able to analyze policies critically, understand those cultural dynamics we talked about,
Right.
and possess solid knowledge of both the broader ASEAN context and their own country's political system.
Right.
It even floats the idea of, like, yearly knowledge tests on ASEAN for students in the field.
Interesting idea to keep them current.
Yeah. And beyond analysis, there's the need to actually engage with policymakers, right, to try and influence decisions.
For sure. Research shouldn't just sit on a shelf.
Exactly. The paper stresses the necessity of international cooperation and integration with ASEAN being a key example of that regional organization.
So how can political scientists effectively advocate for change based on their research? Does this source offer strategies?
It does lay out a fairly common advocacy approach. First, you identify a clear issue. Then get your facts straight. Solid research is key. Build a coalition. Find allies. Figure out who your target audience is who actually makes the decisions. Propose a concrete solution. And crucially, follow up. Don't just drop the report and walk away.
That follow-up is often missed, isn't it?
It really is. And a specific tool mentioned for this is the policy brief.
Ah, yes. Translating complex research into something digestible for policymakers.
Precisely. The paper emphasizes that these need to be concise, super clear, use language that resonates with busy government officials, get the key message across quickly and effectively. That's a critical skill.
Okay, makes sense. What about ethics? Doing research, especially internationally,
Yeah.
that must raise ethical questions.
Absolutely. The source brings up ethics in political science research, particularly in international settings like it mentions Vietnam as an example. The need for clear research ethics codes is highlighted.
What are the core principles mentioned?
Things like integrity, ensuring research quality, complying with laws, doing good, beneficence, being fair, respecting people's autonomy, informed consent, that sort of thing, and justice. Pretty standard ethical pillars.
And potential pitfalls to watch out for.
Yeah, things like manipulating data, maybe presenting findings in a misleading way, or even just researchers lacking the proper competence to conduct the study ethically. It also briefly mentions some case studies looking at ethical dilemmas faced specifically by political scientists in Thailand.
Right. Real-world examples always help. Finally, technology.
Yeah.
How is that changing things for political science research in this context?
Well, technology is seen as a tool for facilitating research, exploring data in new ways, and presenting findings more effectively. It can also help build those wider scholarly networks we talked about.
So things like digital tools for actually collecting data.
Yeah, video cameras, smartphones, online surveys, all that. But also the important considerations around data acquisition, secure storage, and access.
And collaboration tools.
Definitely. Online platforms like Moodle, WebCT, various Web 2.0 tools, they're mentioned as useful for blended learning environments in universities, but also just for fostering interaction and collaboration among researchers across distances.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, drawing from this source on English and political science in Thailand within the AEC context. If you had to pull out the biggest takeaways for our listeners, what would they be?
Good question. Well, I think one key thing is that the AEC, the Asian Economic Community, is really so much more than just a trade agreement. It's this incredibly complex mix of economics, politics, culture, and right at the center, language.
Yeah, that complexity really comes through. And the role of English, it's not just about basic chat, is it?
Not at all. For political scientists working on ASEAN, English is presented as this vital tool for understanding, for analyzing, and actually for participating and shaping how this region evolves. It's instrumental.
Right. And maybe a third point is just the reminder that building a truly integrated community goes way beyond economic rules, that sociocultural integration piece, the cultural understanding, that's ongoing, challenging work.
Absolutely. This deep dive focusing on that specific source about Thailand really gives us a unique lens on these challenges and opportunities.
So to leave our listeners with something to think about, as ASEAN keeps moving forward, keeps integrating, how might this growing interconnectedness start to subtly reshape not just economic policies, but maybe national political debates, even how member states think about their own sovereignty?
That's a great question. Or perhaps with English solidifying its role as the working language, what are the potential long-term advantages and disadvantages for non-native English speakers in actually influencing the direction of the community? Definitely food for thought as the AEC continues its journey.